All right, welcome to the December 11th, 2023 AnonCreds Working Group meeting. We've got the wrap up, hopefully, with a couple of issues to talk about on the W3C format of AnonCreds. If we have, I'm not sure the progress we've made on the Aries issue credential and present proof attachment formats. And we can have a brief discussion as well about eliminating the need for the AnonCreds JSON LD context. Those are the topics I have. Reminder that this is an Aries, a Linux Foundation Hyperledger Foundation meeting. So the Linux Foundation code of, antitrust policy is in effect, and the Hyperledger code of conduct is in effect. Let's be good to one another. All right. Anyone have any other topics they want to raise for this meeting and want to discuss at all? Before we jump in, anyone want to say anything before welcome introductions? Welcome all. Thanks for coming. All right. Request for from Golda for Artem, if you could walk through the exposed APIs a bit. Is that okay with you? Or Golda, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just wondering if that was sort of in the plans. It'd be super valuable for us, I think. We're pretty much ready with our PR, but I think having that walkthrough would be really valuable and a chance to ask questions.
And I think based on what Timo put in, it would be helpful. Artem, are you okay with that? We didn't get a chance to touch base before since Friday when that went in. Artem, are you there? Is that doable, or should we move on to the questions that were raised? You're on mute if you're trying to say anything. All right. Oh, no. Okay, well, it sounds like we got Artem there, but not able to talk, or so.
Which reminds me, is it okay if I record this, Stephen? I don't know if that's part of the code of conduct. Can I record it on my end?
It is being recorded and it will be posted after this.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Yeah, we're recording. Okay. Artem, I'm not sure if you're having trouble speaking or what's going on. Oh.
Sorry, I hear now. Could you repeat that? Just was away.
Sure. Sorry about that. Are you able to do a bit of a walkthrough of the exposed APIs for the two teams that are here, Animo and what's cooking, to go through the APIs that were exposed in this? Is that, I don't know if you're ready for that and able to do that.
Oh, okay. Regarding the API, there is a topic we need to discuss today. Just a moment.
Do you want to share screen and then we can have that discussion as well?
Yeah.
Okay, this one as well.
Um,
Okay, I will stop sharing. There you go.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes. Yeah.
Regarding the new API, you can find it in the design document in AnonCreds docs design, but currently it only shows the Rust external functions. callable wrappers are not presented here. This is what you're probably mostly interested. The best way to get familiar with wrappers API, I believe it's looking demo tests. The there was previously a test for legacy flow, and we duplicated it for W3C case as well. In general, it's almost the same as before. The difference is that in some places you need to call methods on different type of objects like a W3C credential or W3C presentation. And there are two more methods you definitely need to invoke is converting credential to in back legacy form. There are also a set of helper methods, but we need to discuss them today. We plan to discuss. Timo provided a review, and in his opinion, they are not needed, so we probably can drop those methods. And there is similar demo for JavaScript as well. If you go to Node.js and look at api.ts, there is a demo for legacy format of credentials and W3C type as well.
No, I mean, those are super, like, we super appreciate having the test cases. Artem, I don't know if it makes sense for you to go into the core stuff about the decisions you've made. I'm interested in the decisions you've made, just kind of hearing about them. I know I read a little bit the PR very quickly. But in terms of like the decisions about whether it's multiple credentials and about the signatures, I don't know if you have time to do that real quick.
I'm not quite understand what you want to hear exactly. Regarding the API, like we try to preserve it as close as possible to the old flow, same steps, same set of parameters, like you did issuance before for CL signatures. You need to do same now as well. Regarding the AnonCreds format in W3C, let me open it. Also, PR was merged into core specification. Here is the section we added. Here you can find the examples of the current format, current structure, and probably we will change in future. The key difference comparing to the standard representation is credential schema, which describes AnonCreds entities, includes the identifiers, credential definition, schema ID, two of them, and new proof type. It's called AnonCreds proof. There is single field. The first one is type, pointing to its nature, and signature, which contains encoded single signature object. And similar for presentation. Those here. Here's an example.
Artem, have you all
Yeah.
set? Yeah, okay.
I'm here.
Any specific questions, Gold? I was interested what you meant by multiple signatures. Where were you thinking about that? What context are you thinking of that?
Well, I mean, I'm less deep into this than Artem, Timo, or Tuna here, but my understanding, and maybe this is something you guys may want to discuss, is that we may want to have a credential with a list of signatures in it, right? an Aries
Yeah.
credential that is with a list of signatures. And I was wondering if, and I think you may have answered this question here, but I'm not sure that I'm clear if any fundamental changes had to be made, because the proof is already an array. It was an array before,
Right.
right?
Yes.
And the schema for each type, is the credential schema tied to the proof at all? Or is the credential schema just like, this is the overall definition that includes all these proofs?
So like when you sign it with AnonCreds, which is what the work that Artem and his team have done is to sign it with AnonCreds, you would only be adding a single entry in here, which is the first entry you're seeing here of proof. Type AnonCreds proof 2023. A higher level entity like Akapai or AFJ would add additional proofs if they want. The proof excludes the signature in a proof does not include the proof array itself, which
Yes, well, that would be
allows you to create two proofs in parallel and then simply put them into the array independently. And I think so. The AnonCreds work that Artem's done, all it does is create that single entry for AnonCreds. If you decide to pass the same credential into a signing for an ED 25519 signature, you would also get back a proof, and it would be that higher level entity that would attach both of them together. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then the object that contains both of them is this guy here. Okay.
Exactly, is identical. Right. So from the work that Artem and his team done, they've done just it. You pass in an unsigned credential, you get back a signature that you can then use. You get back the object with the signature attached, and with the proof, and you can then manipulate the proof independently without breaking the signature, if you will, because it is only covering the credential, not, and you can add additional proofs. Anyway, I'm repeating the same thing I said before. Any other questions on that part of it? I think the demos are the big thing. The question that Timo raised, from what I understand, was you were thinking, Timo, there's too many items in the wrapper that didn't need to have the W3C, a W3C version of them.
Let me share my screen back.
Okay.
Yeah. So two points from Timo. The first one is about these two methods, create credential offer and create credential request. We decided to duplicate them, but in fact, they just reuse existing API and potentially introduce some confusion. They return exactly the same object as before, and in fact, they can be just dropped without losing of functionality. And in Timo's opinion, we do not need those methods because the reasons I mentioned just before.
Yeah, I think main reason why I added those comments, I think, is because like if we can add less methods, I think it will help, and I think it's good for the users of AnonCreds to understand that the W3C representation is just a different representation of the same credential. Well, by adding these methods, it indicates like, oh, so if I create a W3C credential offer that is different from a non-W3C credential offer, well, the exchange process, the same data needs to be exchanged. It's just you choose how the end representation is, which is either W3C format or the legacy AnonCreds format.
Okay. So we're going to drop these. That's what I heard, right?
We need to decide, probably even vote. I don't have strong opinion on it.
I think my vote would then go to drop them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
it makes sense to me. I don't think we need to have them.
Okay, I'll do it
Okay.
tomorrow.
Okay.
And the second major point from Kim said, let me find, yeah, those helper methods for support non-AnonCreds signature type. It's the same document. One of requirements was to support non-AnonCreds signature as well, but do not provide any methods doing this kind of proofs. Here is an example of flow I just imagined when we first create AnonCreds styled credential, and after that we can add some additional proof to the object. And the only reason why we exposed those methods that when we issue create credential using AnonCreds res, you can only convert it into JSON string. An application would need to deserialize it back in some JSON object in language specific, and only after that it can append some additional data. And this was only reason why we checked another example of W3C credential in according to spec, and added several helper methods appending, which allows you to set additional fields needed for another type of proofs.
Okay. That seems
Yeah, I
helpful.
think my reasoning why I think they shouldn't be included in this library is that if you think of like some implementation that wants to also support ED25519 signatures, then they probably also can issue a W3C credential with an ED25519 signature without an AnonCreds signature, which means they would need to have an implementation that can process JSON-LD credentials, can add proofs to them and process them. And then in that case, you wouldn't need the AnonCreds library to do that processing for you, because how most JSON-LD implementations that I've come across is you have a document and the JSON-LD processor adds a proof to the proof set. And so I like how we foresee using this in AFJ, we wouldn't be using these methods because we already have a way to work with JSON-LD documents. And it's not the concern of the AnonCreds library, I think, to add another proof to it that's not AnonCreds. But that's just my opinion. Like, I don't think it hurts to have them. But I think most implementations that will use this library will have a way to do that already.
Yeah. I mean, that would be my view as well, that the higher level caller is responsible for adding multiple if they want to. And so they would get a signature from an AnonCreds, they would get a signature. They would obviously have to use the same credential as the thing to be signed. But it would be their responsibility to construct the proof, as we talked about earlier, the proof array. And each library would only be responsible for the taking a credential and generating a proof. So I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So this is still like something we have to design and think of, but there is a chance that, like, because we currently already have a JSON-LD implementation that is really focused up, you start with a W3C credential, then you pass that into the JSON-LD signing library, and then only your specific signature suit, so in this case it will be AnonCreds proof signature suit, will be called to create a proof over the document that on a higher level will then be added to the document. So In that case, what we would actually do is we would pass the attributes to the AnonCreds library, get the whole signed W3C credential back, but then extract the proof to have it be added to the document again by our library, just to make it work with how like the JSON-LD signing process works, in at least in the JavaScript implementation, and also then in the Python implementation. I think it works the same.
Yeah. I think that's right, yeah, you'd have to, yeah. That flow is exactly what I was expecting. Okay.
And last item regarding the
Yeah.
structure and schema, regarding the structure of credential schema,
Yeah.
in the current design, it just do not have an ID field inside of schema, but according to specification, it's mandatory. And I believe we can just rename definition field
Yeah.
to be an ID.
Completely agree. I also wonder, getting back to the eliminating of the AnonCreds, eliminating the AnonCreds context, which we could talk about later. One of the things we can do is either simply drop schema because it can be found inside the definition, or move it to the, we could consider moving it to the signature. But it definitely, the credential definition as per the spec contains the ID for the schema. So we could in fact drop the schema entirely. What do people think about that? It does mean you cannot, in theory, you can't request the two in parallel. So potential performance question trade-off, but I think it's pretty minor, that one, especially because you're likely to wind up caching those things anyway.
I think I was making some examples for the presentation exchange today, where I had some reasons where it would be very useful to have the credential definition ID, because you could use it to filter on the type of credential you want. Well, if you encode it in the signature, you would need to have very custom AnonCreds logic to extract the credential definition and use that with presentation exchange. Well, currently you could just do credential schema dot definition has to be equal to this value.
We're not
but
clear, Timo.
Yeah.
Timo, we're going to rename definition to ID, but it's going to stay for sure. I was talking about schema. Now, do you see the same argument for keeping schema?
No, not necessarily. No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, so definition definitely has to stay, and I'm not advocating that one. ID, and so it becomes ID.
Well, I was actually wanting to propose a way in which we could remove the credential definition ID also, because one thing I also like run into a bit is that if you want to also add the ED24519 signature, it's just a bit weird that you sign the AnonCreds credential definition ID in the ED24519 signature. Or you would have to remove like the credential schema parts from it before you sign, but then you again, it's not, then you have to do custom processing to do that, and also to do the verification. So what if we say you don't include the credential definition except for in the signature, because you needed to verify the signature, but we just require you to specify a custom type, which is what you would normally do with JSON-LD, which defines the fields. You can then use that schema, like the type field, which is in the context defined for both the ED25519 and the AnonCreds credential. and then you don't have to include the credential definition ID. And if you want to make sure that it's issued by a specific issuer, then you can do a const filter on the issuer key, which based on the type and the issuer, you basically have the same as a credential definition ID. And then only when you verify the proof, you extract the credential definition ID from the proof value.
I didn't follow that entirely. So you're saying we,
I think that's exactly what Manu wants us to do.
yeah, but I didn't understand what he, what he said, so I was asking, so you're saying drop the credential schema entirely and move everything into the proof?
Yeah, well, drop the specific AnonCreds schema definition. So if you still want to use like a JSON schema definition, which is like another type that could be used across ED25519 and AnonCreds, for example. But yeah, move the AnonCreds specific fields to the proof value. And I think what Manu said makes sense.
Okay, so okay. And not embedded in the signature, but put it in the proof along with the signature, or embedded in the signature?
I think that depends on if we decide to go with the data integrity proof with CryptoSuite, or if we go for a custom type. If we go for a custom type, then it can just be a separate property in there. But if we go with the CryptoSuite approach, so users don't need a custom context for AnonCreds, then we can encode it in the proof value.
Okay, so we're back to trying to eliminate the custom context. So we have a few more things. Okay, so you're saying credential schema moves down, credential schema gets type gets eliminated, definition and schema move down to the proof, with the debate as to putting them inside the signature or outside. Okay, that's where we are.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And if we have it outside the signature, then we still need the AnonCreds context.
Yeah.
Okay, can we? Okay, so
If it's outside the signature, I thought you could put it into the proof array though, right?
yes, yeah, we go into the proof, but the question is whether it's inside the encoded signature, so it just becomes more in that encoded blob, or is it a specific field definition which is below signature, you know, parallel to signature?
Just high level, my preference is to have things observable by humans. So
Exactly.
like, in
But-
general, I'd like to have it out, but if it needs to be there for security, I don't know if there's an attack vector of like something that's not signed being
I
important.
don't think it's a question of attack vector. It's back to this idea that if it is outside of the signature, then we need that custom context, that AnonCreds context still. Now. Okay. So we're agreed on that credential schema is going to disappear from an AnonCreds perspective. Definition and schema are going to move into the proof, and there's still a question as to whether it moves into the signature or beside the signature. We're good there. We're agreed.
And does it mean dropping AnonCreds credential type itself as well? And
yeah, that's a good question.
I think we need the AnonCreds credential in the type, right? Or we don't, because now we don't have any special fields?
Well, we don't, because the only special field is the proof.
Right, okay.
We are saying, you know, you can only create it, you can only create this type of thing by building it from AnonCreds because of the constraints that AnonCreds has. Like it has to be flat and so on, but that's a constraint on what you can represent with this.
But if you take it out of the type, you won't have searchability. Wasn't that Timo's concern?
Yeah,
You don't have searchability based on the credential definition ID, but if we see the credential definition ID more of something of the cryptographic verification process, but we leverage the type and the context for the findability, which is more how they do it in like JSON-LD W3C credentials, then we don't use the definition for findability anymore.
Right, but you still need the type though, right? Because I thought Stephen was saying even take out the type.
In that case, I don't think we need the credential schema at all.
Right. But
Yeah, but okay, go ahead.
up above is the type of AnonCreds credential. Would we need it there? I don't think so, but
No, I don't think so as well. I think we,
Yeah.
for like as Manu said, I think we would maybe need a custom. No, I don't think we need it. Like we would need a custom
Right.
context for data integrity. If we want to use like don't have any AnonCreds context, we would need for VC data model 1.1, we would need to include a context for the data integrity proof type. In
Right.
the VC data model v2, that is already included, and so you won't need an extra context field.
yeah. Okay. Now, could we look at the, so that eliminates, let's go look at the AnonCreds context. If you could. Okay, so that would eliminate an AnonCreds credential, that would eliminate an AnonCreds definition. So those two would go away, we wouldn't need those. What about status list 2023 for where we've got a revoked credential? We would still need that, correct? So one of the things that Manu didn't answer yet, and I'm still waiting on an answer, is do you need a special context if for a type? Like it doesn't seem to me that you would need it for a different type value. But I'm not. Does anyone know JSON LD well enough to know the answer to that question?
There's a playground. We can go check.
Yeah. I think you need to define all types.
Okay. Because I'm not sure how we eliminate. Do we move that again? Move everything into the credential status, the ID of the RevReg ID, that also goes into the proof area?
That's
I
a
think
good one.
that's a bad idea. I think that's a very bad idea.
Yeah.
Because you have to sign over the revocation. Why don't we have we already used the test cases? Like there's a test suite for at least 2.0 and 1.1. We could answer the question in the test suite, maybe. I don't know.
But I think for AnonCreds, it's not needed to sign it because this is just like the way we represent it. The signature already contains like how the revocation works. So it's just for visual purposes to include the ID here. Or maybe we need to include the ID in the proof value then, but like it's already encoded into the signature how the revocation works. So that's different, I think, from like normally if you do the W3C credential signing, you want to have it in here so the issuer commits to like, hey, this credential status belongs to this credential. But with AnonCreds, we already handle that in the signature.
No, you still need to have you have to have the RevReg ID somewhere. And right now,
but you don't need to sign it, right? Separately.
No, you don't need to sign it, but you do have to have it. And this is where it is right now. So this has to be there somewhere, but you're right, it doesn't have to be signed.
So the fact that the thing has been revoked is just basically a new signature over the thing. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just like from a naive user perspective, it's really nice if you could see when you're looking at the credential if it's been revoked.
I mean, this is the problem, is moving all of these things, especially into the signature, means you can't see them, which is pretty ugly.
Yeah. So I think one thing I ran into today when thinking this through is that I would never add another signature besides AnonCreds to a credential if, for example, the credential status type is AnonCreds credential status list, because then I would issue a separate credential to do the ED25519 variant, because then it doesn't make sense in the context of ED25519. And if I think about our wallet, for example, if we want to show like whether this credential is still valid, we would patch that. But if it's signed with an ED25519 signature, then like how does that work if there is an AnonCreds credential status list 2023 in there? So
it could work exactly the same, because what would have to happen in what would have to happen in ED25519 is the holder would have to say, here's my index. So the holder would have to say what their index is. And then they could tell the verifier that, and the verifier could look it up. So what would have to happen in credential status is there would have to be disclosed also the index of the credential in that, which would work fine from an AnonCreds perspective. The holder would never share that, and would work fine from a ED25519, because then the holder does share the unique identifier.
I'm sorry, I don't want to waste people's time, but can I ask a kind of naive question?
Sure.
Is the revocation status is not in the verifiable credential, like we're trying to make something that's like a generic verifiable credential without adding a context, but since revocation status isn't in there, then we have to have a context for things that are revoked. Is that the core problem that we're having?
No, revocation is part of the standard W3C, like credential status is a standard W3C. But the type would have to be specific to an AnonCreds. The type is different from how it's a different type of revocation mechanism.
And in W3C, is the revocation exposed in the credential or it's in the signature?
So it is, and there's different types. And what I don't know is how, when you have a simple or a ED25519 signature, what does the is there a context and is there a type for a status list 2022 revocation scheme?
Well, don't you have a deeper problem too, where if the thing's been signed two different ways and revoked in only one of the ways, is it really revoked?
No, what I'm saying is you could use an AnonCreds definition, whether you're using an ED25519 or an AnonCreds proof type. It can be done the same way. It can use the same revocation mechanism.
Oh, okay.
So could you is giving the identifier enough to do that? So if the issuer includes the index in the signed variant for the ED25519 one, because like for the AnonCreds one, you want to do it zero knowledge, but if you were to include that index in the credential and you sign it, the verifier would be able to know it and can trust it because the issuer signed the index.
Exactly, exactly. So it would absolutely, if we go to that path, it would have to be credential status would A, have to be signed, and B, would have to include the index of the credential inside the RevReg.
Yeah, and so for an AnonCreds proof, then if you really use the AnonCreds feature, you would exclude the index because you don't want to share that.
Correct.
Okay, I think then it makes sense, but maybe we shouldn't then call it AnonCreds credential status list. I don't know, because then it's not required to be used with AnonCreds, right? Or
No, because it would have to be because you've got to, you couldn't use it with status list 2022, for example, because remember the AnonCreds, that registry would also have to have an accumulator associated with it. Like it would still be stored in an AnonCreds way. It's just that the query would be different depending on whether you're a verifier that knows the index or you're the prover who's constructing a non-revocation proof. See what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So it would definitely have to be type AnonCreds.
Sorry, it may be stupid question from my side, but I still do not understand why we try to achieve drop in AnonCreds context in general. If we look for any type of signature, like ED, and go to W3C context, it defines it as part of it. For each kind of proof, there is a context defined. And
Right. But those are, yeah, I agree. I don't think there's any way to eliminate that.
So the reason why is that the W3C has now decided that adding custom types for each signature suit is not the way to go, because it hinders the developer experience, because you need to add custom context for each of the different proof types. So what they're now working on, and what's becoming the default for V2, but you can also already achieve in V1.1, is having one type, which is data integrity proof. That is included in the V2 context already, but for V.1.1, you can add that one context. And then you have a crypto suit string, and that is just like ED25519 2023. But because it's a string value, and so it doesn't have to be registered. So this will make processing a lot easier, because you don't need all the custom types. You just have one type data integrity proof, and then you have a separate value crypto suit, which defines if it's an ED25519 2023 or whatever. And they do this specifically for the reason to move away from having to add a custom type and context for each of the proof types. So even though it is how it's being done right now, they want to move away from that.
Okay, so how do they do that? Like where or would you be able to show how they move away for that for like ED25519?
Yeah, let me share my screen.
Because if we can understand that, then we can get where we want to. Or we can almost get where we want to.
Let me see. So can you see my screen now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they have like a new spec, verify credential data integrity 1.0.
Yeah.
And in here they define let me see, the data integrity proof. So this is the only crypto suit that is defined in here, and the type must be data integrity proof, and the crypto suit must be a string. And they then have different, like I think this note is very important here, which helped me understand it. So I'll also share this link here if you want to read on it. But basically they describe how they have done it and why they are moving to this different approach. And it's mostly about the developer experience. And I think they have specific specs then for ED 2.5.9. Let me see.
So they're basically moving it down a level, but once you define a crypto suite, you can add additional data without having it in a context. Is that what they're saying?
Exactly, yeah. So this is then the spec for data integrity Edwards digital signing algorithm. And then you can see you have in here, the type is always the same. And in here you have Edwards digital signing and then the whole crypto suite. And as you can see, there's the default credentials v2 one, which has data integrity proof. And I have the custom context, but this is for the credential I'm issuing, but I don't need extra values for, and they say everything that's custom to your crypto suite, you should encode in the proof value.
So wait a sec. So created verification method and proof purpose, they're tied to the type. The only thing that's tied to the crypto suite is the proof value. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
So everything's got to be hidden in the proof value.
That's related to the crypto suite implementation or like the actual signature.
That doesn't help us so we want to introduce a new revocation mechanism and that doesn't cover that.
No, so if you need a revocation mechanism, then that's a good reason to add a custom context, because then you, like if I were to want to add like a credential status list 2022, I think you would also need to have a custom context for that.
Okay.
So we should just tell Manu that we need a custom context because we have a zero knowledge proof revocation method, and that's special.
What I'd like to do is sort of put a little presentation together and then get together with Manu and anyone who wants to join and have a discussion about it and go through it. I think we understand it well enough. There is one more. Artem, could you share? This is the one I still don't understand, which is the predicate one. Yeah, it's the predicates. Exactly. So the way we're representing a predicate inside the credential subject is, you see where that age is?
Yeah, in
So
order to drop explicit mapping like we had before in legacy form, when we telling which credential was used for requested predicates. There was similar structure, but now we need to put it somewhere as well. And it was a suggestion how it can be represented, and it also required different type to handle.
So this is on a presentation.
Yeah.
And so the credential subject, obviously the credential subject only has the revealed values in it. So, you know, we've only got Alice's first name there. We don't have last name. But for age, because we're doing a predicate, the value that goes in is to say this is a type of a predicate that and the predicates less than or equal or greater than or equal to an 18. So the to some degree, the the holder and the verifier know that because that was in the presentation request. But this is representing that we're revealing, you know, a predicate on the age. What I'm not understanding is, Artem, do we need to have that for human consumption, for machine consumption? Do we have to know that for the processing of the verification?
On the verification, we check that all requested data actually present, and we compare values and types. We pass predicate types and values, I mean, with the requested data, and there can be multiple predicates on the same attribute, in fact, and this is why we cannot just put H as true, for instance, pointing that it's resolved. Here we explicitly duplicated predicate information. Because, for instance, I can share a proof for different predicates with the same name, but from different credentials.
No, I get the array part. What I don't get is why we specifically have, so.
And it will be much simpler for applications to represent, to handle predicates when it has separate type definition and all requested data.
Timo, go ahead.
Yeah, a few questions. If there would be, like you say, it's an array because it can be from multiple credentials, but in that case, shouldn't the VP contain multiple verifiable credential entries?
No, it's because you could have multiple predicates on age.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Then it makes sense.
That's why the array is there. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was also thinking about like presentation exchange, and there this also was a bit weird, but I think they also didn't pay a lot of attention to it, to like how you would represent it in general. Because if I were to create a presentation definition where I ask that age is over 18 and age is under 18, and so one of them will be true, the other one will be false, how do I represent that in the presentation while still matching the presentation request? Like, I don't know how I think what they focused on with limit disclosure is really like you can selectively disclose values, but didn't take into account really like how would you use this with how would you use this with range proofs, for example? Because I think that's what, like, this is not an AnonCreds specific thing, I think. So it would be nice if we can at least rename the type to something to be more generic, because if BBS would do range proof and you would want to make a presentation of it, it would be nice if there could be some convention of this, I think. Because it's not related to AnonCreds, how you represent this, I think.
Yeah, I mean, AnonCreds 2 is going to have rain proofs and so on. I mean, it's going to have all those. So it does change from that perspective. But all we're trying to accomplish here is what we have today. So this is just about that. What I don't understand really is, do we need this age at? So again, if we want to eliminate the AnonCreds W3C context, so I don't think that's going to be possible, but if we did want to eliminate it, then this would be the other sticking point, which is either we don't even have age as part of the credential subject when there is only a predicate, for predicates. Or we just have age as a name value pair as opposed to a type with its special. And what I don't understand is that there because the machine processing requires it, or is it there for human processing? Does that make sense, Artem? Like, do we have to have it there? Because
yeah, it's rather for human processing, because how else you can represent the user?
Okay.
For machine processing, we can just hide it inside of the proof value similar.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if it's for human processing, it could also be another structure, right? It could be like a specific key where there's like a dot in it and the value is true, for example. So it
I
doesn't
mean,
have to be
the
like an
one
array.
thing-
So it could be
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could be true, comma, false, you know, an array with, various ways you could do that. But the big thing there is, do you eliminate the need for the context and then we're back to the whole context. Okay, we're out of time. I did want to ask one more question of Timo. Did you make any progress on the on what you're thinking of for a new attachment?
Yeah, but I have I had questions on how we wanted to do it. For example, like, do we want a way to include how we can do holder binding? Because there was something that was missing in the other one. Like, how do you bind it to a specific credential subject? And there were some other questions I had. But I think we're out of time now.
Yeah. Okay. Anything you can share on that over the week? Even a proposal and then with unanswered questions, that would be helpful, I think. But
yeah, maybe I don't know if there's also an Arise working group call, but this may also be a good fit for there because it's related to an Arise attachment.
I mean, I was looking at it and I think we can do the W3C formatting independent. We could use the W3C format attachment. But it doesn't cover, I'm more interested in what you're thinking of for, JWTs and SD jots and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, so if there's time on the agenda this Wednesday, I can join and we can discuss it.
Okay, I'll check in with Sam on that. Okay, thank you. Thanks all. That's it for today.
Yeah, thank you a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Take care. Oh, I've lost a mouse. Oh, there's one.